Welcome to Health System CIO's interview with Alda Mizaku, Chief Data and AI Officer with Children's National Hospital. I'm Anthony Guerra, founder and editor-in-chief. Alda, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Anthony. I'm really excited to be here.
All right, great, excellent. Why don't we start off if you want to tell us a little bit about your organization and your role?
Sure, happy to. I'm a biomedical engineer by training, and I get to serve. I have the pleasure of serving as VP and Chief Data and AI Officer for Children's National. For anyone that's not familiar with Children's National, it's a top five pediatric organization within the US. We get to serve the area in Washington, D.C., Virginia, and Maryland. And we also get the pleasure of serving as a destination site for children throughout the world that need to receive care.
All right, excellent. Listen, I'm a little intrigued. Biomedical engineer to the position you have now. You want to give us a little quick overview of that journey?
Yeah, sure. So I started out working on computer-aided diagnostics, and it was in the cancer space. I ended up building predictive models that predicted colorectal cancer, and that's kind of how I got started within the healthcare space. From there, I moved into the life sciences areas. I worked on high throughput genotyping, building custom devices and machinery that will do the chipping process. But I definitely I missed healthcare, so I ended up switching back to the healthcare space and worked in a healthcare system in St. Louis for about 11 years prior to moving to Children's National.
Mm-hmm.
I've been with Children's National for about a year, just a little over a year, and I've
Mm-hmm.
loved every second of it. This was an inaugural role for the organization, so I've had a lot of fun with building the role, the team, and a lot of the capabilities that we have to date, and that we're going to continue to grow.
All right, excellent. So predictive models, that sounds a lot like AI,
Yes.
right? I mean, so what's the difference between building predictive models and AI? And we've got all these types of AI. Um, People talk about sort of old school AI, which has been used forever. A lot of stuff that's used in imaging to detect different anomalies in images and assist radiologists. We have our generative AI. We have now agentic AI. What are your thoughts on how people can, think about all this stuff? A lot of times what comes up in discussions I have with folks is, AI is a toolbox with different tools in it. And depending on what you're trying to do is what tool you select. But how do you think about it?
Yeah. There are quite a few different types of AI, and there's even more and more capabilities that are coming on a daily basis. And it is kind of a sombering moment to think that some of the things that I traditionally kind of developed is considered to be more kind of traditional AI, and
Hmm.
there's so
Right.
much kind of newer capabilities. So what I trained and am used to developing has been more predictive models. So these are taking historical data and from them being able to predict what we think would be kind of a capability in the future, which is great. Some of the capabilities that we see now to date are a little bit more advanced. The generative AI space, for example, it's using historical data, but in a very different way. It's less about detecting the patterns, but it's more about the probability of what word would come next,
Right.
and then building kind of a sentence or a song or a poem or a image based off of that, which is a different type of AI, but very, very impressive. And then with agentic AI, it's really using multiple types of tools, but it's really that AI system behaving as an agent to be able to accomplish a specific task. So it's very much focused on whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish, and then using multiple different types of AI in that space. And then there's also AI automation. So sometimes alone, if we're just using AI alone, it may not accomplish everything. So it's wrapping up Gen AI capabilities with automation. So there's a lot of autonomous processes that can happen. There's a lot of automation around emailing or notification or finding specific patterns and alerting during a specific time. But based off of what you said, Anthony, it's very true, and that's kind of my belief is that technology can be cool, but technology for technology's sake doesn't accomplish much, particularly in the healthcare space. So for us, it's really important to be able to partner with research teams or clinical operational leaders to really understand how we intend to use the AI systems or the Gen AI systems, what it is that we're trying to accomplish, what are we trying to automate, what different experience are we trying to give to the patients that we have the privilege to serve, and then from there being able to leverage AI to accomplish something. So that collaboration, that thoughtfulness of the outcome, the goal that we're trying to accomplish, that's the secret sauce. That's where the magic is at, in picking the right technology to be able to be applicable in that use case. It's one of the most important things for us to be able to do.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting dynamics, you touched on it, in a role like yours, any role that's in IT in a health system, is this idea of trying to solve problems. So starting with the problem and then finding the technologies that can help with the problem versus understanding these cool new technologies and deeply understanding their capabilities and then saying where can this help? And I guess you have to do both.
You do.
The biggest concern people have is, again, the shiny new toy, the shiny new solution that you're running around wasting time trying to use. And that can be counterproductive. But there does have to be time on both sides of that equation, right?
It does, absolutely. When we do have a breakthrough in technology, like we did with Gen AI, there is this thought process of where can we apply this, but typically when you pick a problem and you apply a specific technology to, it is an area of opportunity for an organization. So no matter which way you go about it, either you apply technology to an area of opportunity or you have an area of opportunity or you apply a technology piece to it. But either way, there's this evaluation that can happen. And the way that I think about it is, um, it can happen intentionally or unintentionally, but the goal, the end result is this ability to look at value and impact and apply a technology to better understand if I can solve 5 things, which one brings more value? Which one is more beneficial? And then the other side of the coin is feasibility. Something can bring value, but it could be much more challenging or much more difficult or less feasible to be able to accomplish. So it's understanding both is what are we trying to solve? What value does this bring? And how quickly can we solve this problem? And it's somewhere between the balance between those two variables that yields kind of the most optimal result or outcome or problem to solve, and that's what typically enables the development or the proof of concept of trying to solve a specific problem.
Yeah, and that to me is the real fascinating art of a position like yours. And I know there's formal governance structures and there's committees to source the problems or to source, what the users, the clinicians are dealing with. You got to deeply, deeply understand workflow in your position, right? And that's hard in healthcare. If you're not, I know you're a biomedical engineer, but there's so many departments in healthcare, so many specialties, so many areas with deep, deep technical workflows. And to be of most assistance is when you understand them. When they talk about embedding IT into clinical areas, like you actually have people from IT in these staffs, so you can help. But I am just extremely interested in that dynamic, and the overall concept is you have a finite amount of resources to help the organization. I have a certain number of people, I have a certain budget, and I want to help the organization. How do I optimally do that? So I'm working on the right things in the right way. Any more thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's what makes this role so interesting, is that every day can be a little bit different. And you're absolutely right that we have to understand the operations of an organization and at a very detailed level to be able to be of most help to that organization. And that can come one of two ways, and it most often needs to be both ways simultaneously. So, one is understanding who has the authority and autonomy to make decisions in this part of the organization. And it's really sitting down with them and saying, what do you believe the problems are in this area? And understanding that area. It could be shadowing, it could be embedding in a specific part of the organization. The second part, which I think is equally important, is leveraging the data that's already collected about that part of the organization and understanding the process through the data. Sometimes you get different stories. Sometimes what we believe to be the operational pathway may have actually two or three different ways of how it's implemented. And you can see that variation and that variability in the data where you may not see it as part of the day-to-day workflow. And it's really bringing those two pictures together and saying, this is what I'm seeing in the data. Does this make sense? Is this in alignment with your understanding? And by understanding the data and understanding the workflows, it also creates another level of vision and planning and visibility, which is around these are the biggest problems that we have in this area. And whether it could be excess days, or it could be the patient experience, or it could be some sort of operational efficiency that needs to happen, or a delay or a bottleneck that's happening in an area and not really well understood of why that's the case. Or it could be staffing, not having the right staffing ratios in place. But it's really understanding the data and understanding the people and the process that are part of that that really brings together this vision of how do we move forward?
Hmm.
What's the best path forward? And that could mean automation, it could be modeling, it could be digital twin, it could be predictive models, it could be Gen AI to be able to automate some things. But that comes later, understanding the problem and how big of a problem that is and what's the impact. If we were to solve this problem, we could see now 5 more patients a week. Okay, great. That's different than if we were to solve this problem now. This is 10 more patients that we can see a week. So to be able to open up our capacity and our access for care. And then it's applying technology to be able to solve a specific problem. But the key, which you've already mentioned, Anthony, is understanding the workflow, being working side by side with the clinicians, building solutions that give those the ability to make data-driven decisions. And then it's sometimes it can be at the elbow support of looking at the data and coming back with some insights or knowledge that may be hard to see individually, but when you look at the entire system, when you look at the entire data set, you can spot some patterns that are statistically significant, and they can be meaningful, and they can be insightful, that can be applied to the workflow to make some change to drive whatever the outcome is operational efficiency, better experience, better care, whatever that may look like.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Um, so it's interesting. Most people in IT positions like yours, um, they're part of their, I think part of what you're supposed to be doing is improving things, right? Change. And then
Yep.
we throw that word innovation is in, right? We're supposed to be starting to do things differently. That's like what have you done to change things is almost part of the role.
Mhm.
Um, and so when I think about that, I think about the incentive to drive change. And then I think about how hard it is for people to change and how
Mhm.
change averse people are. So it's almost like those are opposing forces. Like here's some really cool stuff you could be doing differently to improve your workflow versus, a little concern there on actually. So my question to you is how much do you see your role in driving change and pushing change versus supporting change? And a lot of people say, well, you got to sell it first, right? You got to sell your vision of what needs to change or what could change. And that's where you get people, you have to bring them along. You have to lead them. You have to convince and sell it. Um, of course, you can support change that's requested, but I guess driving change that's not requested is harder. You meet more resistance. What are your thoughts around that whole dynamic?
Yeah. I think being a change agent is definitely a big part of this role. And there are some ways to impact that in a graceful way, because you're right, it can be abrasive, particularly when there's someone that's resistant to change or scared to change or may not realize that there needs to change. So the first thing is that we tackle the big problems, the problems that really are problematic for the organization. So we have a reason for change. Again, technology for technology's sake is not very helpful. Change for change sake is also not very helpful. But change with a reason is most important. So understanding that this is an area that we need to change and why do we need to change. And then there's probably two ways that I've seen most successful in accomplishing it. One is bringing people along. So it's less of this is the vision, implementing it, and then trying to get people to adopt it, but it's being next to them side by side so that they're influencing it, their fingerprints all over it. They're part of the process and they get bought in. So that's one aspect of it. It's just doing it together, and using data to make decisions and having productive conversations as to why we may need to go in one direction or the other, and exploring some other options that may yield some variable favorable outcome or they may not. And then the second aspect is, um, partner with people that are excited about the change and they see the need for it.
Mm,
Leverage that success. So instead of going to the skeptic right off the bat and trying to convince someone that doesn't see it, they don't see it. And they're not going to see it until they see it successful. So work with someone that is excited about what's being done. They're passionate about it. They're going to be a better partner. And then
mhm,
leveraging that joint success is a way to then scale and adopt and ensure adoption in other areas that may not be the right area to start for various reasons. So in general, change can be hard, but if we do
mm,
it together and if we do it for with people that understand it, that get it, that are bought in, it's certainly much easier to show success. And then with that success, it can lead to greater kind of adoption and growth and a level of maturity to
mhm.
adopt that throughout the organization.
You've mentioned being data driven a couple of times, and it's extremely important, right? And tell me your thoughts on how best to do that. I would imagine it's, um, before you implement a change, you want to collect data on current processes and how long things take, and whatever data you say is going to evaluate this process. And then we institute a change, and now we want to capture those same metrics. Right? Is it kind of a before and after type thing?
It is. It is a little bit of before and after, but I would say the first step is understanding the data because sometimes the data may not be reliable, it may not be captured correctly, or there may be issues or errors with it. So it's really understanding on if we're going to build a measure and if we're going to say we're going to change this thing about our organization and we're going to track how we're doing before and we're going to track how we're doing after. It's the first step is just making sure that the data that we're going to be using to track that change and to measure it is indeed reliable. And that's where data governance can come in. It's looking at the variability, looking at multiple aspects of the data to certify it essentially. And there's critical data elements that we take a look at. So it doesn't have to be that every single thing about that data set has to be perfect, but the
Hmm.
things that we depend on, that we rely on, that has to be dependable. So that's kind of step one. And then it is putting measures together. So step two is agreeing on a definition, and that can be harder than you think sometimes, and it can take
Hmm.
a little bit of time to agree on this thing is gonna have this name, and it's gonna have this definition, and this is what it means, and this is how we're gonna measure success. And then after that, it gets a little bit easier because, yes, we can track before, we can track after, we can put control charts in place, and we can put dashboards in place to track progress and what has happened in a specific period of time and measure a kind of a later downstream process to see that this is happening and this is a favorable outcome. But I just want to stress the importance that the initial steps of data governance and measure definitions are some of those most critical steps that some people just jump into. Okay, let's
Yeah.
define, and this is the status quo right now. But if you don't have reliable data and if you don't have a reliable definition, then what it leads to is questioning down the line when you get to measuring the after, then we say, well, did we really make an impact? Because the data may not be reliable or we didn't agree on a definition, and it leads to some back and forth conversations that really should be ahead of that entire process.
Yeah. So that's a lot of work. As you said, that can be the bulk of the work. It's not collecting the data and computing it into the dashboard. That's maybe the easy stuff. It's that hard, and that's where I think what you mean is you need human beings sitting down in a room agreeing on things, and that can be the hardest part, right?
That's collaboration, and that
Yeah.
can be making time for it,
Yeah.
making sure that it's effective, making sure that the right conversations are had, that the right people are in the room, and that people agree and believe the are bought into the
Yeah.
decisions that are made.
Yeah, and they're on record for agreeing. You
Yes.
know, we can't always think about it and meet about it again, right? This can be a problem in any especially in healthcare where people are risk averse and, let's talk about it again next time. But no, we need to move forward. Do you feel that element sometimes where you come on, let's move this. We need to move this forward. I know healthy, you got to be so collaborative and nice, and maybe that makes things a little slow sometimes.
I think we can move quickly if we do it with intention.
Uh huh.
And there can be roadblocks, and some issues might be it takes a little bit longer to validate something. So it's
Mm-hmm.
understanding um, where the roadblocks might be, or what are some of the parts of this process that takes a little bit longer. And it's having that foresight and having that experience that this can take time, and there's things that we can do ahead of time to be able to ensure that this is done without missing a step or without skipping a step, without
Mm-hmm.
introducing more risk to the process, but doing it efficiently. So
Mm-hmm.
part of it can be, communication, and if there are delays, that they're legitimate delays, and that's communicated to whatever the stakeholder. There may be an expectation that something is done in a specific time frame, and it may take a little bit longer. And um, sometimes it's important to maybe add an additional feature. This concept of a minimum viable product,
Mm-hmm.
and building something in a scalable fashion. Sometimes you may need an additional feature to be added, and that can delay a launch of a product. But it's better for it to be right than to be on time, and sometimes it's
Mm-hmm.
better for it to be complete than to be in a specific time. So time can be a stressor, or it's always something that we're thinking about, is to be able to meet the demands and the needs of the business in a very timely manner. But it's trying to balance that with the
Mm-hmm.
usability and the amount of trust that you can have in a product. To have a product, particularly in analytics, AI, and Gen AI, be delivered on time or early, but it's not mature as to where it needs to be to meet the organization need, that's also another problem. So it's just balancing that out.
Mm-hmm. So, how would you describe the dynamic of of the users in the organization as far as your role is concerned? And what I mean by that is, do you find the dynamic is essentially people and users wanting to use AI more and more and more, and you having to put in place the framework that allows them to do so safely and securely? Is it sort of you're trying to stay up with the demand, and we don't want frustration where we have our brilliant clinicians that want to do all kinds of cool stuff and research, and you're like, no, you can't use that yet. We're working on it, but you can't use that tool in that way yet. You have to use it in this way because it's safe from a cyber point of view. I mean, are the users just urging? Are they like crazy to go with all this stuff?
That's such a good I love that question, Anthony, because believe it or not, the answer is both.
Uh-huh.
Both are happening simultaneously, and it seems so counterintuitive because they're kind of in the opposite end of the spectrum. In
Uh,
one sense, you're trying to make sure that AI and analytics is used in a responsible way, and that you're trying to, almost slow it down a little bit to make sure
yeah.
that it is safe. And then in the other hand, you're also trying to push it and get the organization to use things because they're not using it. And it's really not intuitive for both to happen at the same time, but it does. And that is the world that we live in. We actually have to do both. There are cases. So one of the first things that I had to develop when we started on this AI journey is a policy, AI responsible use policy, and to make
Hmm.
sure that the decisions that we were making were guided by this policy around using AI and technology in a responsible way. And then from there, we made decisions and approved tools to exist in our environment that people in the organization can use in a safe manner.
Right.
And I can say confidently that those tools are being used by many in the organization, but not everyone that should use them.
Ah,
One
that's
aspect,
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
So one aspect is understanding utilization, understanding who should use it but is not, and what
Mm.
do they need? What's the barrier? And it's really
Mm-hmm.
pushing those. So for things that we have approved, it is trying to push that to be utilized more and more in the organization. And then the other extreme exists where there are those technology forward AI enthusiasts that want to use more that's available out there. And we cannot keep up with the demand of being able
Right.
to review them, approve them. And a lot of tools have duplication in capability. So it's understanding, do we really need to bring this new tool in, or is this already covered in one of our existing approved tools? And doing that due diligence can take time, and it can seem like it's It's just something that we need to do our due diligence around where it is safe, it is intentional when we're bringing a new tool in. So both ends exist. For those that we have approved, we have to increase adoption, but we also have to
Yeah.
continue to review new tools to be able to make additional capabilities available, or sometimes be very honest around this is not a new tool that makes sense in our ecosystem because this capability already exists here. So it's maybe education, knowledge, licensing of existing tools to be able to meet the needs of those AI enthusiasts or those that are kind of
Yeah.
in the forefront of the technology and innovation that we see in the world.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And it reminds us that there's a huge spectrum among your users in terms of AI interest, AI capability, and I've thought this for a little while that if AI can safely assist you in your job, it's not okay not to use it
Yeah,
because you're not as efficient as you should be. So you're not doing what you need. You see what I'm saying? It's like you're a painter and you say, "Oh, I'm not going to use a brush." No, you can, you're a painter. You have to use the brush. So if you can use AI safely in your work as an organization, we expect you to use it because it's going to make you faster and better. So as you said, it's bringing those people up to speed, and then you have your super users. And in healthcare, as in every industry, not every user is created equal. You
mhm,
have super docs over there who, can get you on the phone when they need to get you on the phone. And if they want to use this crazy tool that you haven't even heard of, you have to say, hold on, like, let me get back, let me get back to you. I got to look this thing up. And oh, it's a pre-release kind of thing, and no one's vetted this thing. And no, not yet, right? So
that's
you got a lot
exactly
going
right.
on.
With AI, a big topic of conversation that we have is, exactly what you said is this feeling of expectation
Yeah.
that if it's safe and if it can be used, is it a choice or is it an expectation for an organization to say you must use it to be
Yeah.
effective and efficient? And I've heard this conversation from a patient perspective as well.
Mhm.
Do patients expect their healthcare organizations to use AI or for them to interact with agentic systems? And uh, do they have a perception that a system that uses it may look at m- different options or different things associated with it? So I don't know what the answer is, but it's certainly a good conversation for us to be part of and just to understand what the expectation is in general, whether it's in the workforce, whether it's patients, and also some of the visibility around AI systems, particularly those that are developed outside of an organization, because you can certainly buy an AI tool and bring that into to an environment, to a healthcare system, or you can build your own.
Mhm.
And for those that are built, we have a lot more understanding and flexibility with the use and what's happening behind the scenes, what's happening with the data, if there's a bias associated with it, if there's, what training data was used to measure it, to build it, we can measure and understand all of that.
Yeah.
But with an external tool, that is not as readily available. So
Yeah.
there is a lot of push from, healthcare systems and leaders like myself, where we want to understand when we're bringing a tool in, how is it trained? What types of bias
Right.
are associated with it? And can it be truly used safely? And it's hard to say that until you use it and you test it and you see
Mhm.
where some of the issues are. So that entire process to say that you can really trust this, there just has to be a lot more communication around that due diligence and almost like specs that come in with AI
Yeah.
technology that makes us more aware and understand what its performance is in various areas. And particularly in pediatrics, our data is different than just healthcare in general because we're dealing with kids. So it's an area where a lot of testing has to happen and understanding the performance of something. So someone may be more skeptical around the trust part of it. And I
Mhm.
think there's more that we have to do in the industry in general, in technology, to be able to communicate that effectively
Mhm.
and have expectations of utilization, but where trust is much more understood than what we have today.
All right. Very good. Just a couple more questions, and I'm gonna let you go here. One of the interesting debates here around AI is human in the middle. I one CIO we were speaking with said, "I want I want a human at the front, in the back, in the middle, on the side." So he that was very amusing. Um, and then I've also heard a CIO say, whenever I hear the term human in the middle, I know, I'm a little disappointed because that doesn't scale. So that's not the ultimate, the ultimate vision is no humans, but we're nowhere near people being comfortable with that yet. Most people say human in the middle, especially around clinical stuff. What are your thoughts around that whole dynamic?
I can see those both of the extremes because I've seen cases where with human in the middle, it can actually take said human more time than if they were just to do it to validate that the AI did it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So it can really be a problem
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
where it can actually generate more time than just doing it. My take is that it's hard to take the humans out of the equation completely. There's certain things that AI can automate, but I think the sweet spot for us is to integrate the outcome that's generated by AI in a workflow that has humans in it because we
Mm-hmm.
can catch things.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some phenomenal things that you can do these days where you can build a Gen AI model to get a specific outcome and then have another Gen AI model check the accuracy of said model, and you can kind of chain those.
Mm.
You can have 3 or 4, and the job of the additional ones is to check the accuracy of the first one, and if it's not accurate, it kind of sends it back, and AI can actually find mistakes, and it can find hallucinations, and you can build a lot of accuracy through those methods, so that can be relied upon much more so than we do right now, is to build
Uh-huh.
AI to check AI.
I love that.
Make sense?
I love it. It's like science fiction. It's great. We're
It
getting into
works.
all fun
It
areas.
works. Yeah.
Yes, I'm sure it does, but it's very interesting. Go
It
ahead.
drops hallucinations quite a bit, and
Yeah.
then the outcome of that specific model can then go to a human, like, in a workflow, and I'll give you an
Uh-huh.
example, something that we've talked about is this concept of understanding what the patient needs to do next. AI can pull that out from clinical notes, from what it sees in the
Yeah.
patient's chart, and it can say, "This patient needs to do these 5 things next," based off of everything that we know about them.
Right.
Well, that's great to know that, but what are you gonna do with it? You can have a human review it and double check that it's accurate, but that's not very meaningful.
Uh-huh.
What is most meaningful for that is to route it into work use so that
Mm-hmm.
we can send automated messages. We can make phone calls. We can send uh, messages via the
Mm-hmm.
EHR, the electronic healthcare record, and get the patient to take those next steps and those next that next action that's most beneficial for them. So for me, I think there's things that can be done to create more automation within AI, and it can be done more safely by using AI to check itself. But the most critical thing is to embed it into a workflow, have humans integrated as part of that so that they're checking the AI, but they're also doing the next steps. So they're providing value, not just checking the AI system.
That's
And that's
mm,
maybe the best way to move forward for now until AI becomes even more sophisticated
yeah.
than it
Yeah.
is now.
Yeah, it's crazy, and this is not something I need you to address, but it's like we're gonna get to this point with all this technology and knowledge and AI and workflow and routing where all these things happen that need to happen automatically. And on paper, you're like, everyone should be healthy, but the problem is people still like Doritos. That's, you know what I That's the problem. That's what we're gonna hit, right? It's like we could do all this stuff, and we can help you take your meds, and we can send someone to the house and notifications, and people still like Doritos and hot dogs, and that's the problem. So,
No, I, uh, I heard of this company. I can't think of the name. I think they're in California out somewhere, but it's fascinating. They take this concept of, people are going to make the choices that they make.
right,
But they take a twist of, let's make sure that they're informed. And I think it's a CGM, like a company that uses CGM to collect data that measures I don't think it's A1C, I think it's glucose readings
okay,
of the patient, after they've consumed these foods. And they track it for about like 2 weeks or 3 weeks or
uh-huh,
something like that. And it figures out how someone responds when they eat Doritos. And, so then the next time that they wanna eat Doritos, they say, "Well, the previous 3 times when you've eaten Doritos, this is what your glycemic response is of your body. So you can have them and just know that you're gonna have a very high spike, or you can have this Dorito alternative.
Uh-huh.
This instead
Uh-huh.
because this doesn't have those
Vegan,
spikes and
lactose-free something
yes,
that you probably can't even get down because it's so
exactly.
maybe
Yeah.
it's not that good. But therein lies the human conundrum. But you're going to do everything you can, and we're all going to do everything we can in the areas we can help.
That's
So
exactly right.
I love it. I love it. Let me give you one more question. Any final thoughts? You have a unique background. You have certain perspectives that a lot of our listeners won't have. Everyone brings something to the table, unique vantage point, unique insight. So, what's your best piece of advice for those in similar positions at similar sized organizations? So, you're talking to your colleague at just a different organization. What's your best piece of advice to them?
Oh, that's a great question. I'll give you kind of an advice of um, where we started with our
Sure.
journey, being an inaugural role, and one of the things that I had to figure out is, building the organization, building the vision, and the technology behind the scenes. One of the things that was very important for our organization and for me to be able to figure out how to enable is you need a strong foundation. It doesn't happen without a data. It doesn't happen without trusted data. For us, we made the decision to put our data in a cloud platform, but that is not really the most important part of it. It's really to create that enterprise data model because
Hmm.
everything stems off of that. A one-stop shop, one source of truth. I think that's so important. And you can't rely on analytics and AI being done in pockets and the various uh, applications that we leverage. I think there does need to be a one-stop shop where everything flows through. But the most important aspect is to be able to bring value quickly. So it's not building that data platform and taking 2 years to build it,
Mm.
then building, AI and Gen AI and analytics on top of it. It really has to happen at the same time. And I think that's so important. So for us, it was bringing the right team, understanding the team size that we needed to be able to build analytics, AI on top of the platform as we're building the platform. And this is a little bit of building the plane as you're flying it, which is not
Hmm.
comfortable and it's not how we're trained. We're taught like, okay, you do step one, then step two, then step three, and that just doesn't work in healthcare. It doesn't work for business in general. So you really have to figure out how to build the plane while you're flying it. And it is possible, there's a way to do it, and we need to be thinking like that more and more often. But, the other part of that too is understanding, the team that's needed to be able to do something like that.
Hmm.
And to bring the right people in. And that's something that, it's very much top of mind for us, especially as we're going through some EHR transformations and making sure that we have the right leaders and the right individual contributors that are coming in. I think we have to kind of put people first and make sure that we have the right people. So that hiring process is just so important to, especially for teams that have the flexibility to do that, to bring in new talent or to
Hmm.
to build teams to bring all these capabilities.
All right, to make the investment. Yep. All right, Alda, this was amazing. A wonderful conversation. I think our readers are really going to enjoy it. I want to thank you so much for your time today, and I hope we can catch up with you down the road.
Yes, I love that. Thank you for having me, Anthony. This was a lot of
Oh,
fun.
you got it. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.